defining relationship as a unique connection between the world's oldest and largest democracies, with a special obligation now to demonstrate that our governments can deliver for.
The most important priority is essentially it is oriented towards the development of the people.
Defense remains an area of mutual cooperation. We as Honeywell has interest in that, so we'll certainly support what both governments want to propose forward.
It's a matter of pride for all of us simply because both countries can learn a lot from each other. In fact, America can learn so much from India.
Main तो आज हम इसके लिए आए हुए हैं, मोदी को सपोर्ट के लिए।
यहाँ भी 3 दिन रुकने वाले हैं और मोदी के लिए बहुत सपोर्ट करने वाले हैं।
Pictures there of the anticipation ahead of the Prime Minister's US state visit. Hello and welcome to Newscentre. I'm Ashmit Kumar. Now, as Prime Minister Modi's state visit is about to begin, there is great anticipation on what are the takeaways for India. The focus is clearly on defense and technology, and it is here that the India Cellular and Electronics Association wrote to the MeitY Secretary Alkesh Kumar Sharma to seize the moment. The letter cites how the US tariffs on Chinese imports has created a golden opportunity. The letter claims that the US is an electronics importer to the tune of over $550 billion. But while China's share may be dropping, India's share is at about $4.5 billion, or a little over 0.5%. This, while the likes of Vietnam and Mexico are stealing a march. To discuss this further, I have with me the chairman of ICEA, Pankaj Mohindroo, as well as India's former ambassador to the WTO, Jayant Dasgupta. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Mohindroo, to you first. This is a big visit here. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of energy. Tell us, in terms of deliverables, in terms of takeaways, what does this US electronics import bill mean for us in terms of where we currently stand and what the size of the opportunity, what the size of the pie essentially is in the US?
Thank you for having me. It's enormous. We were just there in May for the ICT dialogue, and the warmth and the increasing friendship is incredible. That's all I can say about this. Now, the US is the largest importer of finished products, electronic finished products, over $500 billion. We have seen very strong growth in the last 3-4 years, especially in the last 2 years, about 350%. Our share is very tiny. It's not 0.5%, Ashmit, as you said, it's about nearly 1%. What has shifted from China has, I agree, has largely gone to Vietnam, Mexico, and Taiwan. They have taken the major share of the growth and the reduction in Chinese imports to the US. But the future is extremely bright. We have currently extremely strong endorsement from Apple and its ecosystem, which is kicking in at this moment. That's the most valuable company in the world. And I think that is encouraging other American companies to set their sights on India. So I'm very optimistic about the future.
Interesting. In fact, just speaking of Apple, for the month of May itself, the run rate that they've managed to hit is 10,000 crore rupees in terms of output. And that was just for the month of May, speaking of Apple. But let's take this conversation forward. Mr. Dasgupta, thank you once again for joining us. The question to you is, in 2018 is when a 25% duty was levied on various Chinese imports by the US. Now, more recently, we've seen Anthony Blinken visit Beijing. There are words coming in from Xi Jinping saying that perhaps there is a need for a stable US-China relationship. But there is still that caution with respect to economic positions being guarded. There is still that tension between the two sides. What opportunity does this give India, especially at a time when the Indian Prime Minister is visiting the US?
The first thing I would like to mention in this context is the initiative on critical and emerging technologies, the ICET. Now, this is something which was signed in May 2022, and it heralds a very deep relationship that India and the US want to have in 6 focus areas. One of them, of course, is about the supply chain for semiconductors, defense industrial cooperation, space, telecom, innovative ecosystem, etc. Now, US administration or their congressmen would ask their industry to, hedge their bets and to take it as regards investments into India.
Sure.
They would ask them to take their own estimation. But now there is a change, and this change is that the US administration, the US Congress men in their private capacity, they are all exhorting US industry to invest in India. And this includes semiconductors, the electronics industry, and other high-tech industries. So this is a very good harbinger for attracting investments into India in electronics. As far as electronics is concerned, if you look at the figures
Sure.
for last year, we have done about $25.3 billion worth of exports, and it has grown by 49%. Of course,
Sure.
it has been pushed mainly by, or not mainly, but significantly by our burgeoning mobile phone exports, which have reached about $11.5 billion last year. So the time has now come for us to take a leap. And this can
So
only
big
take
opportunity
place.
this.
Yes.
Right, Mr. Dasgupta. So a big, important opportunity here. And in fact, speaking of hedging bets, Mr. Mohindroo, let me come to you. We've been hearing for a while now about the China plus one strategy. We have multiple countries competing to be that plus one. India, no different. India is trying to play the role of the next big manufacturing destination. But is it a fair assessment that countries such as Mexico and Vietnam have perhaps taken a leap ahead in terms of providing that manufacturing base, because the numbers seem to suggest that the plus one strategy seems to be flowing more towards these destinations rather than India?
Yes, I think the elephant moves a bit slowly. And one thing, Ashmit, I'd like to clear that the 25% duties do not include some very important products like laptops, tablets, smartphones, chargers, lithium-ion batteries, etc. So they have been kept out to keep the interest of the American companies and the American consumers. So, as I said, we have to get our act together. Besides Apple, we have to see that all the other important companies and the product categories, which is laptops, desktops, tablets, telecom equipment, LED lighting, consumer electronics, industrial electronics, all of them, we have to ensure that we have our act together. Our strategies are getting sharpened. Our policies are rolling out. We've just had the IT hardware PLI 2.0 coming in. We are looking at very seriously at a hearable and wearables PLI also, and then consumer electronics. The industrial electronics sector is just getting calibrated, and strategies are being formed around that, and also LED. So the base, the foundation, which is the production base here, and the ability of companies, both Indian companies and GVCs, lead firms, and then GVCs to establish in India and take off, is going to take us a little time, but it is a very sure-footed effort. I'm very confident that within the next 3 to 5 years, you will see that this figure of 4.5 billion will cross $100 billion. That is the export to US we are targeting. And this may not happen by 26, but definitely by 27 or 28, we should be crossing $100 billion of electronics export to the US. And the cooperation from the other side, as Jen said, the ICEA, the cooperation from the other side, we, MITI and NSF just signed a MOU last month, which will be announced very soon. that is a great opportunity for the two countries to do technology R&D, especially in electronics and the digital space. And you'll see a lot more happening in that area. So I think India will also contribute majorly to the development of the US economy, further development of the US economy.
Sure. Right. Let me take that across to Mr. Dasgupta. Mr. Dasgupta, what Mr. Mohindroo is saying that there needs to be a lot more work that needs to be put in for the Apple effect to rub off on some of the other companies. Let's talk about it in context of the Prime Minister's visit. Now, Prime Minister will be meeting multiple top CEOs. He's also reportedly meeting Elon Musk. But in terms of attracting more players from the US, more American companies above and beyond Apple, how do we make it happen? Is it a question of merely dialogue and communication, or is it a question of dialogue and communication coupled with reforms and restructuring back home here in India?
Well, the issue about reforms and restructuring is extremely important because a businessman or a business entity is not going to invest in India just because the government of the US and the government of India are strategic partners and have a very, very good relationship. It's all going to come down to the ease of doing business, the business environment, the opportunities of growth, and third country exports from out of India. And what does India have to offer, which other competing countries like, let's say, Mexico and Vietnam and Taiwan are not in a position to offer. So that is the kind of judgment which we have to exercise. And mind you, the US, of course, is has the cutting edge technology in semiconductor development. But if you look at a whole host of electronic products, it's basically in China, in Taiwan, to a great extent in South Korea, a little bit in Japan also.
Sure.
These are the countries which have a lot of technical expertise and knowledge, and they are manufacturing not only in China, but all over Northeast Asia and East Asia. So this is, if we want to make a dent in that, if we want to attract investments, we have to be more attractive than the things on offer in these countries. So that is what will be an acid test for us.
Right. Sure. We're running out of time, Mr. Mohindroo. Let me come to you for a final word here. You mentioned you've given yourself, the industry, the target of reaching $100 billion in terms of US imports by 2028. The question I want to ask you is the current gap that we have with respect to the jurisdictions that we're competing with, the likes of Mexico, Vietnam. How do we bridge that gap? Is it a question of more PLIs, more incentives on offer, or is it more structural issues such as perhaps correction of duties?
I think Jayant put it very beautifully, the parameters he mentioned, but I think you've added a few. I think I'll in addition to tariffs, I will correction of tariffs and having a very clean and a predictable environment. I think the most important thing, which Jayant also mentioned, is the ease of doing business. I think we are moving towards a nation which is going to be the best place of doing business. And with the demographic dividend we have and the enormous workforce we have, I think India is going to be an unbeatable destination. But these are work in progress situation. At the moment, we have public statements from many of the US companies which are they're expressing concerns about, for example, the mover scheme which we pushed so hard. And now there is uncertainty about the mover scheme. This is certainly not increasing the enthusiasm. So I think there's, as I said, a lot of homework. We have to put our heads down, become the most competitive and the best place to do business. And with what we offer, I think the sky is the limit for us. I think $100 billion is just a beginning. Right. I'm very serious about it.
We'll end the discussion on that note that the $100 billion mark is just the beginning. Mr. Mohindroo, Mr. Dasgupta, thank you so much for joining us. It was an interesting take on what perhaps can be the big takeaways from Prime Minister's US visit, state visit. But that's unfortunately all the time that we have. We need to slip into a very short break. But coming up, what will Prime Minister's visit to the United States mean for cybersecurity in India? I speak to Sean Duca of Palo Alto Networks right after this very short break. Stay tuned. Well, a very good evening and welcome back to Newscentre. Now, Bill Gates, Tim Cook, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, Sam Altman, American tech titans that have all visited India over the last 6 months. Tech is clearly in focus, as is quite visible from Prime Minister Modi's state visit to the US as well. But what does the focus on tech mean for cybersecurity concerns? What does this visit to the US mean for cybersecurity in India? To discuss this further, I have with me Sean Duca. He's the VP and Regional CSO for Asia and Pacific, as well as Japan for Palo Alto Networks. Mr. Duca, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you, hosting you here on CNBC-TV18. Let me ask you the first question. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of anticipation, a lot of energy with the Indian Prime Minister's visits, first state visit to the US. That again raises questions that when we look at it from the lens of cybersecurity, what does that mean in terms of takeaways for India? What can India walk away with from this US state visit?
Well, thank you for having me back. But what this really means for India is the fact that we're really seeing greater collaboration between different nations. And if you think about what we're trying to focus on, it's really around cybercrime, which is a borderless crime. And at the end of the day, we really do need to focus on greater collaboration between different countries, whether it be from a policy, regulatory standpoint, or even just simply learnings and understanding of what does the threat look like if organizations or industries are being targeted in one part of the world. How do we learn from that and apply some of those learnings here in India? And at the same time, how do we apply what we've seen happen locally in India to other parts of the world as well?
Great. Let me then ask you a follow-up question. We've had 6 tech titans from the US visit India, whether that's Bill Gates, Tim Cook, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai. They all visited here. They've taken this conversation on digitization, on tech forward. But when we talk of tech deployment, when we talk of tech adoption, what does that do? What does this digitization do to cybersecurity concerns from your perspective?
digitalisation is a constant, and it's something that's been happening for many, many years now, and will continue, no doubt, for many, many years to come. I think as we start to move and embark on digitising a lot more of our services, a lot more of our data, and a lot more of our lives really connected online, and businesses in turn, what that really means from a cybersecurity standpoint is that line has really sort of been drawn to say, let's now think about a different way to try and tackle these cybersecurity challenges. With the escalating rise of cybercrime activity that we're seeing around the globe, we have to think about different measures to try and stop these attackers from launching their attacks against our critical industries, at the same time against the people of our nations. So in order for us to achieve that, we have to think differently. And it's that mantra of do different, because trying to achieve the same outcome but not really change anything is not really going to help anyone really sort of achieve those goals.
Sure. Let's talk about some of those concerns here, especially with respect to some of the recent instances of these cyber attacks that we've seen, whether that's the Ames ransomware attack that was reported about. We've also had very recently scams being generated from countries, from numbers from different countries. We've also had recent reports of sensitive data about COVID being leaked on Telegram. With these concerns in mind, what should be the primary focus of the authorities, of the entities managing the data?
From an authority standpoint, we should really be thinking about, one, raising education and awareness to ensure that it's that constant drumbeat. We need to make sure that organisations and, I guess, government entities are really thinking about how do we raise the awareness? Because this is something that's always going on. And if one scam will always end up looking like something else that we've seen in the past, scammers will always try and just find different ways and techniques to try and dupe people to really share, divulge sensitive information. The second part is really around the fact that we are dealing with an automated adversary. So for government organisations and entities, they need to be collecting vast amounts of data, but really focus and honing in the type of data that they collect around what does the attack look like? How does the attacker actually morph? What techniques are actually being used? And really sort of start to use that data and then turn that into a way that we can orchestrate and automate our defences. And whether that be at a nation level, whether it be at an industry or industrial level, we need to think about how do we start to do this. And the only true way that we can achieve that is by leveraging automation at greater speed to achieve that. And this is where you're seeing artificial intelligence, machine learning really being leveraged. And from a Palo network standpoint, something that we've been leveraging for more than 10 years now to really try and combat and fight cyber criminals around the world.
I think I'll take a cue from that, the word automation. You've almost preempted my next question. The question I wanted to ask is that now we have various AI tools available. We've seen various use cases by anti-social actors. We've seen instances of deep fake as well. So while on one hand you talk of how companies, cybersecurity firms such as Palo, Alto are gearing themselves using automation, the anti-social actors on the internet are also doing the same, arming themselves with AI tools. Is that a concern that we need to look at when we go forward? That AI, one of the takeaways could be more tools in the hands of anti-social actors?
I think with any tool that's ever come out that's really disruptive in nature and transformative in nature, there's always going to be someone that's looking to leverage that for nefarious reasons and activities. So we always need to be mindful and cognizant of that. There are risks and challenges with any type of tool. So there's always going to be someone that's always going to be looking to do something bad with it. So we always should be mindful about what they're actually doing. But at the same time, how do we actually use that for our own greater good? How do we ensure that we're putting it in the hands of organisations and government entities to really think about, well, how do we get the benefit out of it? Because in the end, the artificial intelligence and those large learning models that we're seeing out there, and even the proprietary models that we're using internally at Palo Networks, really help us achieve a way that we can start to identify the anomalous, the net new threats that have never been seen before that are targeting individuals and organisations around the globe. Because the moment we see that, we can then start to share that information and collaborate with other organisations or entities or even different types of countries around the world as well. And that's something that I think we need to keep on fostering. That sharing of threat intelligence is where we're really going to start to achieve critical mass in stopping some of these cybercrime activities from taking place.
Sure, Mr. Duca. My one final question to you, we're running out of time, but I'll just ask one more question, that at a time when there is a greater understanding of these risks involved on the cyberspace, do you see that the pace of that recognition is perhaps slower in government or public-related entities as compared to the private sector? Is that something that you've seen?
I don't think it's really a case of slower in one side or the other. I think it's more a case of, with the rise of artificial intelligence, and this is something that's been happening for some time, I think it's probably taken a lot of people a little bit back in terms of trying to work out how should we try and really ensure that we are doing and leveraging it in the right way. How do we ensure that we're not doing something incorrect here? And I think this is where you're seeing a lot of countries around the world that are starting to look to foster, regulations around how to ensure that they're doing this correctly. You're hearing it from people that are in the industry themselves saying, we do need to find some other way to really try and control and foster safe innovation around all of this. Because there's no point releasing some piece of technology and not thinking about what could the world look like tomorrow if it fell in the hands of an adversary of ours. So I think it's making sure that we're all connected, both at a public and private sector, and communicating and working out what could we do and what could we do best.
Sure, Mr. Duca, thank you so much once again for joining us and sharing your thoughts and perspective. But that, unfortunately, is all the time that we have. It's a wrap on this edition of News Centre. More news and updates continue right here on CNBC-TV18.